Mason and his friends had been planning their trip to Las Vegas for months. It was a chance to escape the grind of daily life, to let loose in a city that never sleeps. With a rental car packed, they set off on a 6-hour drive through the desert, eager to make it to Sin City by nightfall. The first few hours flew by with laughter and excitement, but as the sun began to set, they found themselves alone on a long, dark stretch of highway. The only light came from the car's headlights cutting through the pitch-black desert. When Mason glanced in the rearview mirror, he swore he saw a figure sitting in the back seat, a woman, dressed in white, her hair hanging over her face. But when he blinked, she was gone. Did you guys see that?" he asked, glancing back at his friends. They looked at him, confused. "See what, man?" asked Jay, who was half asleep in the passenger seat. Mason shrugged it off, chalking it up to fatigue and desert haze. But something felt wrong, like a cold chill had settled in the car, clinging to his skin. An hour later, they passed a rundown gas station on the side of the road, the kind that looks like it's been abandoned for decades. But as they drove by, Mason felt a sudden, overpowering urge to stop. The gas station was illuminated with a strange, unnatural light that seemed to beckon them in. He pulled off without thinking, to the surprise of his friends. "Mason, what are you doing?" his friend Tom asked, unease creeping into his voice. I don't know," Mason mumbled, his hands seemingly moving on their own. He turned off the car, and they all stepped out, staring at the gas station. A lone attendant stood behind the counter, his face hidden in shadow. He had an old-fashioned look about him, as though he belonged to a different era. His clothes were dusty, and his smile was wide, too wide. "Evenin', folks. Headed to Vegas, I reckon," he drawled, his voice hollow. Mason nodded, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. The attendant reached under the counter, pulling out a small, worn-out brochure. "Take this with ya. Might need it for the road ahead," he said, handing it to Mason. Mason took it, but when he looked down, he saw it wasn't a brochure at all, it was a photo, an old black-and-white picture of a woman in a wedding dress, standing in front of a Vegas chapel. Confused, Mason looked up to ask the attendant what it meant, but the man was gone. The gas station itself seemed darker, its lights flickering, and his friends were nowhere to be seen. "Mason." He spun around, startled, and saw his friend standing beside the car, waving him back. Mason blinked, his mind hazy. He glanced at the gas station one last time, but it looked deserted, as if no one had been there for years. They drove in silence, each of them casting nervous glances around the car. After a while, Tom broke the silence. "Did you guys see that picture he gave Mason?" Jay shivered. "Yeah, I saw it. That woman, something about her eyes." Mason was about to brush it off when he glanced in the rearview mirror again. The woman was there, clear as day, sitting between his friends in the back seat, her face hidden behind a veil. He slammed on the brakes, sending everyone jolting forward. The car screeched to a halt, and Mason turned around, his heart pounding. But the back seat was empty. "Dude, what's wrong with you?" Jay shouted, rubbing his shoulder. Mason was breathing heavily, unable to shake the image from his mind. There was a woman. She was right there, between you guys. "Look, man, you're freaking us out," Tom said, glancing at the empty road around them. They decided to keep driving, hoping to shake off the eerie feeling. But as they approached the Vegas city lights, the air grew colder, and the car seemed to groan and creak, as though straining under the weight of something unseen. Finally, they arrived at their hotel. The friends tried to shrug off the strange experience, laughing nervously as they checked in. Their room was on the 13th floor, a fittingly ominous touch that they joked about as they rode the elevator up. But when they entered the room, Mason froze. There, on the bed, was the same photograph he had seen at the gas station, the woman in the wedding dress, her eyes staring right at him. "Okay, this isn't funny," Mason whispered, feeling his blood turn to ice. Jay tried to laugh it off. "Maybe the hotel put it here for Halloween or something." You know, scare the tourists. But Mason couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, watching them, waiting. That night, they all had the same dream. They were standing in a dimly lit Vegas chapel, the air thick with the smell of roses and dust. The woman in the wedding dress was there, standing at the altar. Her face was hidden by her veil, but they could feel her eyes on them, cold and piercing. One by one, she held out her hand to them, as if beckoning them closer. The next morning, Mason woke up drenched in sweat. Jay and Tom were sitting by the window, looking out over the strip, their faces pale. "We need to leave," Tom said, his voice shaking. "I saw her. She was at the end of my bed last night, watching me." Jay nodded, looking just as terrified. "Same here. I could feel her breathing." They packed up and checked out, feeling like they were fleeing rather than leaving. As they drove back through the desert, none of them spoke, the silence heavy with fear. Hours later, they reached the gas station where it all began, and Mason pulled in, determined to confront the strange attendant. But the gas station was abandoned, the windows boarded up, dust and cobwebs covering everything. It looked like no one had set foot there in years. As they drove away, Mason felt the weight of the photograph in his pocket. He pulled it out and stared at the woman in the wedding dress, her eyes gleaming with a dark, knowing look. And then, in the distance, he saw her, a figure in white standing by the side of the road, watching as they passed by. None of them spoke about that trip to Vegas ever again. And though they tried to move on, to forget, Mason always felt her presence, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment when she could claim him once and for all. And every time he looked into the rearview mirror, he expected to see her, sitting in the back seat, watching, waiting, as if she was still a passenger on a journey that would never end. Ethan had been dreaming about his trip to Las Vegas for weeks. He was traveling solo, a rare escape from his demanding job, and eager to let loose. Arriving late in the evening, he checked into the old but glitzy Nevada Sunset Hotel. It had a vintage charm to it, despite its slightly run-down exterior. When he approached the front desk, the clerk handed him his room key. "Welcome, Mr. Everett," the clerk said with a strange smile. "Room 507, right on the 5th floor. One of our quieter rooms." Ethan chuckled, thinking he was simply being polite. He tossed his bags onto the bed, already exhausted. The room had an odd smell, a mix of stale cigarette smoke and something musty that he couldn't quite place. But what immediately caught his eye was a large, dusty mirror mounted on the wall facing the bed. He noticed a faint, handprint smudge on the glass, and as he went to wipe it away, he felt a strange, cold draft sweep over him. Shrugging it off, Ethan decided to settle in and get some sleep. He turned off the lights, closed his eyes, and drifted into slumber. Around midnight, he awoke to the sound of whispering. The room was dead silent, yet he could hear murmurs, faint and unintelligible, as though someone was speaking right next to him. He sat up, heart pounding, and looked around, but there was no one there. The whispers faded, leaving only the ticking of the room's antique wall clock. Ethan tried to fall back asleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he felt a presence, as if someone was standing at the foot of his bed, watching him. He glanced at the mirror, but it was too dark to see anything. He reached for his phone and switched on the flashlight, aiming it around the room. And that's when he saw it. In the reflection of the mirror, there was a shadow, a dark, shapeless figure that seemed to be hovering just behind him. He whipped around, but no one was there. When he looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. Ethan shivered, feeling an intense urge to leave the room. But he reminded himself it was probably just fatigue and paranoia. Determined not to let his imagination get the best of him, he lay back down and shut his eyes tight. Just as he was drifting off, the bed creaked, as if someone had climbed onto it. He held his breath, paralyzed. Slowly, he opened his eyes and froze. A pale figure was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking directly at him through the darkness. She had long, stringy black hair that hung over her face, and her eyes were hollow, lifeless, fixed right on him. He bolted upright, but the figure vanished. Shaken, he jumped out of bed, grabbed his things, and fled the room, deciding he would rather sleep in the lobby than stay a minute longer. As he reached the elevator, he saw the night clerk staring at him, an unsettling expression on his face. "Trouble sleeping, Mr. Everett?" the clerk asked, his voice low and cautious. "What's going on in that room?" Ethan stammered. I saw someone." The clerk gave a weary sigh, as if he'd heard it all before. "Room 507 has history. Years ago, a woman was found dead in there, alone. Some say she's still waiting for someone to find her." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why rent it out?" The clerk shrugged. "Most people leave without ever seeing a thing. I guess she only shows herself to certain guests." Ethan didn't sleep that night, and by dawn, he was on the first flight back home. The memory of that night never left him, the image of the woman on his bed etched into his mind forever. And even though he left Las Vegas, every now and then, he could still feel her cold gaze, as if she'd followed him home, waiting, watching from some unseen corner of his room. And each night, when he looked into his own mirror, he swore he could see her shadow, lingering, waiting for him to fall asleep. Megan and her friends had been planning their Las Vegas trip for months, hoping for an unforgettable weekend. The road trip had been lively, and after miles of desert highway, the neon lights of Vegas finally came into view. But an accident on the freeway forced them to detour down a desolate, winding road, far from the bright city. They drove down the lonely road for nearly half an hour without seeing a single car. Strange patches of fog clung to the road despite the clear desert sky, and the occasional coyote howl echoed through the stillness. Their excitement waned as the atmosphere became more and more unnerving. "Let's just go back to the main road," Sarah murmured, glancing out her window with unease. "No signal, no idea where we are. Great start, guys," Megan replied sarcastically, trying to shake the uneasy tension. Just then, they saw it, an old, run-down gas station, its flickering sign barely legible, "Last Chance Gas." "Maybe we can get directions," Megan suggested, pulling up next to the lone pump. The place looked abandoned, the lights barely illuminating the cracked pavement. A single door led into the station, its glass smeared with grime. No one was around. As Megan stepped out of the car, she noticed a strange smell, a mix of gasoline, rotting wood, and something metallic. She wrinkled her nose and approached the door. Just as she reached for the handle, it swung open on its own, creaking ominously. The room inside was dimly lit, filled with dusty shelves and empty fridges. A small bell rang as she stepped inside, yet no one appeared. "Hello?" she called out, but her voice was swallowed by the stale air. Suddenly, an old man appeared from behind the counter. His eyes were sunken, skin pale as if he hadn't seen the sun in years. He gave her a toothless smile, sending a shiver down her spine. "Headin' to Vegas, huh?" he rasped, his voice like gravel. "You're not the first." Megan forced a smile, her hand still on the door. "Yeah. Just need directions back to the main road." He chuckled, a low, hollow sound that echoed off the empty walls. "Once you're on this road, it's hard to get off. Not everyone makes it back, you know." Megan's stomach twisted, and she felt an overwhelming urge to leave. But before she could, the man reached into his pocket and handed her an old, crumpled map. "Follow the road, but keep to the light," he warned. "If you see someone waving for help, keep driving." She nodded quickly, muttering a hasty, "Thanks," before rushing back to the car. Her friends laughed nervously as she got in. "What did he say?" asked Dylan from the back seat. "Just, directions. Let's get going." They continued down the narrow road, following the map. But as they drove, the fog thickened, swirling around the car in eerie shapes. The headlights barely penetrated it, casting strange shadows that twisted and flickered. Then, up ahead, they saw something, a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman, her hair disheveled, clothes torn, her eyes wide with terror. She waved frantically, but as the car slowed, Megan's mind echoed the old man's warning: if you see someone waving for help, keep driving. Don't stop, she shouted, her heart pounding. But she looks hurt. Sarah protested, reaching for the door handle. Megan slammed her foot on the gas, swerving around the woman. In the rearview mirror, she saw the woman's expression change, her face twisting into a horrifying grin as she screamed soundlessly, vanishing into the fog. The tension in the car was palpable. No one spoke as they continued on, shaken by what they'd just seen. Minutes passed, and the fog grew thicker. Suddenly, another figure appeared on the road, this one a man, waving his arms frantically, his face pale and bruised. Megan tightened her grip on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. We're not stopping. The man's desperate expression shifted as they approached. His face contorted, becoming skeletal, eyes hollow as he lunged at the car, clawing at the windows as they sped by. The sound of his nails scraping against the glass sent chills down their spines. They drove in silence, the fog swallowing every trace of the man. Just keep going, Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The road seemed endless, twisting through the barren desert, the fog thickening until they could barely see. The car's headlights flickered, casting strange shadows that danced across the road, and soon they found themselves back at the gas station, the exact spot they'd left an hour ago. Is this some kind of sick joke? Dylan muttered, his voice wavering. Megan shook her head, panic clawing at her insides. It's like we're stuck in some loop. They tried the road again, taking different turns, but every time they wound up back at the gas station. The fog grew denser, and the night seemed darker with each attempt. Finally, the old man reappeared, standing by the pump, watching them with an unsettling smile. Megan rolled down the window, desperation overcoming her fear. How do we get out of here? She asked, her voice shaking. The man tilted his head, his grin widening. You can't, he replied, his tone almost gleeful. You belong to the road now. Like the others. Before they could react, the car's engine died, and the lights flickered off. Panic set in as shadows began moving in the fog, figures emerging from the darkness, faces they recognized, the woman, the man, and others, all trapped in silent screams, reaching out to them with cold, lifeless eyes. They tried to start the car, but it wouldn't budge. The figures closed in, their fingers tapping on the windows, ghostly whispers filling the air. Megan's last thought was of the old man's words, once you're on this road, it's hard to get off. As the fog enveloped them, the Nevada Sunset Hotel remained out of reach, forever beyond their grasp, as they joined the restless souls trapped on the highway, lost to the desert, bound to haunt the lonely road until the end of time. Love these stories? YouTube algorithm suggests that you would like to listen to these stories. Click on the video on the screen.